I've been with my company now for a good amount of time. I'd say probably about 4 years now. Thanks to the amount of time I put in, I have seniority over the other associates. Not to mention, I have a lot more training and credentials under my belt than they do. The company recently picked up a new contract for some kind of big government office building. Where it's located is rather strange for it to be a government office building. I won't get into exact locations, but to give you an idea of what the area it's located in looks like and what makes it so strange is that it's located in damn near the middle of nowhere. It's a giant 9-story building surrounded by a giant parking lot. The parking lot is surrounded by a metal fence that's about 10 feet tall. On the top of the fence is barbed wire. There's only one way in and one way out in front of the building at the opening of the parking lot that meets the side road that it's located off of. The side road is about 3 miles away from the main road, which leads to the highway. The fence is completely surrounded by woods. There are literally no buildings, houses, or any other signs of civilization for miles around. Due to my seniority, I get to work whatever shifts and days I want. Typically, I choose to work mornings or evenings and have weekends or Fridays and Saturdays off. But unfortunately, after a few months of us being at this new contract, we started having trouble keeping the overnight people. During the day, there's usually about 3 guards working all 7 days of the week. On the overnight shift during the weekdays, there's 2 guards. And on the overnight shift during the weekend, starting Friday to Sunday, there was only 1 guard. I should mention before I go any further that every guard is armed on every shift. As I said, we're having trouble keeping people on the overnight shift, mainly on the weekend overnight shift. Because of this, my supervisor asked me if I could help out until they could hire more people and work some overtime on the weekend overnight shifts. I could have, and in hindsight, should have said no thanks. But at the time, I actually needed the extra money because I was getting ready to move to a new apartment soon. So I went ahead and accepted the extra shifts. The first couple of weeks were fine. No issues, nothing strange. But what happened on the 3rd weekend is what made me regret my decision for the overtime. It was a Saturday night around 2 a.m. There was a very bad thunderstorm going on outside. I was sitting in the camera control room, which is on the top floor. The control room has a window that oversees the back part of the parking lot. In the room, there's 3 large-sized computer screens that show the CCTV live feeds from all the cameras located throughout the building, as well as the few cameras that are outside in the parking lot and by the entrance exit of the parking lot. I was sitting in the control room doing what I normally was doing while working overnight by myself. I had the lights off, watching movies I previously downloaded on my phone, while also playing games on my Game Boy. I'd been sitting down for a while and got up to stretch my legs and move around a bit. I was also starting to feel a little sleepy and was thinking about going down the hall to the vending machine and grabbing an energy drink. After I got up and walked around the control room for a bit, stretching my legs, I went over to the window, peeked through the blinds to look outside. As I was watching, I was looking at all the heavy wind and rain blowing the random debris around. I was just about to walk away from the window to grab that energy drink when all of a sudden a flash of lightning lit up the surrounding area past the fence. And just then I saw a figure dart from one tree to another that was a good distance from it. I'd say about 20 feet. I kept my position looking in that direction through the blinds, waiting for another flash of lightning to see if I could see exactly what it was or if my eyes were playing tricks on me. After a couple of seconds went by, another flash struck. This time I didn't see anything near or around the tree that I saw the figure move to. At that point, I thought clearly my eyes were playing tricks on me and that it was just me being tired. I left from the window and went down the hall and got the energy drink. I immediately downed the whole thing, hoping that it would kick in soon. I was finished with it by the time it took me to walk back to the control room, which wasn't long, only about 5 minutes. I got back to the control room and I immediately noticed that one of the camera feeds had been knocked out on one of the screens. It was the camera feed to the back part of the parking lot that the window overlooked. I went over to the window and looked out the blinds in the direction to the camera. I spotted it dangling in the wind from its wires from the post that it was on. I figured the heavy winds must have knocked it off somehow. I sat back at my desk and put in my report for the night and then went back to what I was originally doing. A few minutes had passed while I was watching a movie on my phone, and I heard the alert sound the system gives when someone is accessing a part of the building that requires a code to be entered on a keypad. I looked at the main screen and pulled up the tab that shows me the access points of the building. It showed me the one being accessed was the one in the back of the building by the back parking lot. At that point, a shiver ran down my spine as I realized someone was outside. From the shadow figure to the camera being knocked out, and now to this, the keypad being accessed. Whoever it was had the code because they got in and the system showed me the green light. I thought to myself, it couldn't be another worker or security guard. If it was a worker, we would have a memo telling us who it was and what times they would be here, as well as what part of the building they would be in. I knew it wasn't a security guard because I would have known about that too. I picked up the phone that was on my desk in an attempt to call the cops, but it was out. I looked at my phone and, of course, no service. I figured the best thing to do would be to try to walk around the hallway and try to get service on my phone. I left out of the control room and into the hallway. I started walking down the hallway toward the service stairwell while looking at my phone, hoping to get a signal soon. Just then, as I was looking down at my phone, the power was shut off. I immediately decided, since I was so close to the stairs, that I was going to run down the stairs to the front lobby and run out the door to my truck. I got to the stairwell and opened it up. It was damn near pitch black in there. I decided to use the darkness to my advantage and walk quietly down the steps. I figured if this person cut the power, they had to be in the generator room, which was in the basement. Unfortunately, the basement was the only flight of steps below the lobby where I was headed. Also, the generator was not too far away from the stairwell that I was in. I made it down to the 4th floor, and suddenly I heard a door open at the bottom of the stairwell. I stopped dead in my tracks. At this point, I knew I was armed, but I was thinking to myself, even though I went through training, I don't think I was ready to shoot anyone. I was hoping and praying that it wouldn't come to that. As I was standing there, immersed in my thoughts about my training with my firearm, I started hearing heavy footsteps walking up the stairs. I wasted no time in coming up with a new plan. I was going to turn around and walk as quickly and quietly back up the steps as possible to the 6th floor where I came from. At the top of the steps, a few feet past the door I had come from, there's a ladder that leads up to the hatch that leads to the roof of the building. I was going to climb up the ladder to the top just before you have to open the hatch to go any further and just hide in there in the pitch black darkness until whatever happens next. I turned around just as I did. My gun banged against the metal to the stairwell railing, making a loud clang sound. As that happened, I froze, and so did the heavy footsteps. A few seconds had gone by, and then I heard whoever it was running as fast as they could up the steps. I sprang as fast as I could, running up the steps as if my life depended on it. As I got to the top of the steps, just before I was about to pass the door I'd come from, I had an idea: to create a diversion on the fly. I quickly opened up the door hard and loud, then let go of the handle and let it close and slam on its own. I continued to run to the ladder and climb up it. By doing that, I would make it appear that I had run out the door. With only seconds to spare, I made it up on the ladder. The man, distracted by the door tactic, opened it without even looking in my direction. He ran into the hall, the heavy door closing behind him. That's when I saw my chance. I leapt down from the ladder, only about 10 feet high, landing with a loud thud as my feet hit the floor. I bolted for the stairs. The man must have heard the sound because I had barely made it down 1 floor before I heard the door open again and his footsteps pounding down after me. Both of us were sprinting as fast as we could. I managed to stay 1 floor ahead of him the entire way. When I reached the lobby, luck was suddenly on my side. Behind me, I heard a loud crashing noise followed by a cry of pain. I wasn't certain, but I think the man had tripped and fallen on the stairs. I wasn't about to wait around to confirm. I burst through the door, ran straight for the entrance, and used my key to unlock it. Fortunately, I always parked my truck close by. With the wind howling and the rain pouring down, I hit the fob to start the engine and unlocked the doors as I sprinted across the lot. I jumped into the truck, threw it in reverse, and just then caught sight of him, dressed in all black, his face covered by a mask and hood, bursting out of the building and charging toward my car. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it, tires screeching as I tore out of the lot and onto the side road. It wasn't until I was nearly at the main road that I got a signal on my phone. I immediately called the police. They arrived about 15 minutes later, and I followed them back to the building. I told them everything, filling out reports for both them and my company. We searched the entire building and surrounding area, but found nothing. The scariest part came when they checked the stairwell. Apparently, when the man had fallen, he dropped something. The police recovered a fully loaded semi-automatic handgun. To this day, no one knows why someone would have broken into that building. There was nothing particularly special about it, except that it was government property. Whatever the case, I'm just thankful that luck was on my side that night. I was assigned as a security guard with a midnight shift at a very large Omaha warehouse when I was a young man. This building was mainly used for storage, and it was huge. We as security personnel were tasked with hitting several stations inside this building on the night shift, and this required that we did a lot of walking. There would always be 2 personnel assigned to the warehouse at night, one patrolling the outside perimeter in a car, and one inside the warehouse on foot. Being outside sitting in the comfort of a car was obviously the more desirable of the 2. I was working a Wednesday night. I was about half an hour into my shift. I would start the shifts walking around for about an hour, just surveilling the place before sitting down in one of the security offices. This room had some low-budget ancient camera system that at the time was impressive technology, but it only had 2 screens because there were only 2 cameras in the entire warehouse, one in the northeast corner and one in the southwest corner. That's why we couldn't just sit on our butts in the security office our entire shifts and had to actually patrol the place. This was a shared warehouse for some tech companies, and a lot of expensive equipment was held here, hence why 2 security guards would have to be there every single night. The warehouse layout was similar to that of a regular grocery store. There were like 10 to 15 aisles and one intersecting aisle that cuts between the other 10 to 15 in the middle. I was still making my initial rounds around the place when I saw all the way down at the end of the aisle I was in, something. At the end section, it was like this white thing that kind of resembled the shape of the head, and it was poking out from behind the end section. Mind you, it was so far away that all I could make from it was this white-looking object. I elevated my slow stroll to a moderately quick speed walk, and halfway through the aisle, the white thing disappeared behind a tower of boxes. This confirmed my fear that it was a person, and that I wasn't alone in there. I now ran to the end of the aisle, hoping to see the other night guard walking around or something. As I stood in the southwest corner of this giant warehouse, I looked up at the camera in the corner, and it was pointing in the direction of the thing I just saw. I looked in that direction, and there it was again. It may be the 7th aisle, that white thing I saw earlier. This was a lot closer, and I could make it out to be someone's face, as I feared, but it wasn't the other security guard. It was this extremely pale, ghoulish-looking face. They once again slowly hid their face behind the tower of boxes, and walkie-talkied the other guard on duty, and he radioed back that he was in the car by the back section of the parking lot. He said roger that, he'd be here in 5. Getting off the phone with him, I was nervous to approach the aisle that I saw the person's head. Even though this is exactly what a security guard's purpose and job is, you never actually expect or anticipate seeing any action. I took a deep breath and ran to that aisle and stopped at the end of it to look down it. The person wasn't in sight. I figured they must have ran for it, so I ran halfway down the aisle hoping to catch up to them. But I stopped when I smelt this horrible putrid odor. It smelled like a dead, rotting carcass. I followed the scent until it became overwhelming, and I found the source of it. It was coming from this big wooden box that was different from the rest of the boxes. I pulled the lid off the box, and inside was a dead body laying in a pool of blood. The most shocking part of it was that it was missing a head. And walkie-talkied the other security guard again and yelled at him to call the police and report a dead body in the warehouse. I said this all while running as fast as I could to the back exit of the warehouse. Struggling to get enough air, I threw up the second I made it out the door. I ran to the other security guard's car and sat in there with him gasping for air. He was still on the phone with the police, so I took the phone and told them whatever the other security guy didn't. Given the nature of the situation, they sent like 5 or 6 cop cars and basically had the entire place surrounded. The body was loaded into an ambulance, and for a good chunk of the night, police were in the warehouse doing forensic work. Perhaps the weirdest part of all this was that when trying to go back to the video footage captured from the night before, the footage cut out for about 3 hours in the middle of the night. There was no explanation for this happening. I've thought about this night for almost my entire life, basically. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but
I don't really have an explanation for this. I've thought about some far-fetched possibilities, though, like that whoever the murderer was in the warehouse that night and was holding up the severed head of that body, hence why it looks so pale and ghoulish. In fact, it gave me chills just now thinking about it again.
I used to work in a 24/7 general store in a mall in South Carolina. So while the mall itself would close around 9:30, our store would stay open all night. There were two entrances to the store, one from inside the actual mall itself, and then a back door that people could enter through after the mall closed. Past 9:30, I would always have to shut the gate separating the store from the mall. Given that this was a smaller store, it was never really busy in the deep night hours, which also made my job very uneventful most of the time. But there was one night shift that turned out to be anything but uneventful. It was towards the middle of my shift. The gate between the store and the mall was down, but I could still see through it, obviously, into the dark half-lit hallway of the mall. The mall always had night lights on, which were much dimmer but bright enough for the security guards to see what's going on in the cameras. I was doing my own thing, organizing the shelves, making sure everything was neat, when I heard a rattle at the metal cage. I looked and saw some guy standing on the other side, grasping the gate with his hands. At first, I thought it was a security guard on duty, with the only logical explanation, even though it was rare to ever see them walking around. But as I got closer and asked if there was a problem, I realized it wasn't a security guard. It was just some random man. He was wearing a dirty black and white plaid shirt and very baggy blue jeans. Most notably, though, what made this exceptionally strange was that he was just looking up at the ceiling. I inched a little closer and again asked if something was wrong and if he needed help, but he just kept looking up and shaking the gate. Now, there was some kind of protocol I was supposed to follow in the case of something like this in order to get the mall security. However, I didn't know what number to dial, I didn't know how to work any kind of intercoms, so all I could really do was shut it out. I turned my back to the creepy man and went back to my register behind the counter as far away from him as possible. Unfortunately, the shelves are angled perpendicularly to the counter, not parallel, so the man at the gate was in direct line of sight from me. Oh, he finally seemed to back away, like literally walked backwards, though with his head still up at the ceiling. All that was going through my mind was, where could security be? It was to my understanding that there would be at least one person watching the cameras at night. Anyway, I tried to just move past it, resuming my cleaning activities. I couldn't help but look back outside to the mall every once in a while, though. Thankfully, he was gone now. Eventually, someone came into the shop. I heard the back door slide open. I was in between two shelves and couldn't see them, so I continued with my work. After finishing up sweeping the aisle, I went back to the register to wait for the customer. I saw the customer now. They were standing at the end of the last aisle, to the left, the alcohol aisle. He was looking up. At first I thought he was looking at the top shelf, so I looked away. I only looked at him for maybe a second. I bent down under the counter to put the broom and dustpan underneath, and when I stood back up to look at the customer, I felt like my heart nearly stopped. He was looking at me with a smile. Not a grin, but a wide-lipped smile. And also sank in right away that this was the same man that was out in the mall from earlier, only now he had apparently taken off his black and white plaid shirt. I stared at him and he stared at me, and I think this went on for 30 seconds. I didn't know what to do, and I had actually frozen up in fear. The face he gave a smile was a pure look of horror, something straight from a horror film or someone's nightmares. I felt like he stared into my soul. I opened my mouth to speak and my voice trembled. I think I said, "Get out," or "I'm calling the cops." He didn't move. He didn't even bat an eye. I ran to the back room and locked the door so I could call my manager. She wouldn't pick up after several attempts, though when I gave up, I heard a tap at the door. Not a knock, just a very gentle tap. I sat like a nervous wreck in that back room for a good 5 minutes, wanting to be anywhere but there. But when the fear of this person stealing a bunch of items and losing my job became greater than the actual fear of the person, I stepped back outside and looked around, but the man was gone. He was gone. For good this time. Our shop has cameras, so they caught all of it. When my shift ended, I told my manager about what happens and showed her the video footage. She was shocked and kind of freaked out herself. I only worked there for another month after that, then moved on.
Several years ago, two friends and I heard from a mutual friend about this creepy abandoned warehouse or furniture store that was only a few miles from my house. One night while on a drive, the three of us decided to check it out. We parked at a Walgreens a few hundred yards from the warehouse and started walking towards it. As we got closer, my friend, I'll call him Jim, kind of chickened out and stayed back while me and my other friend, I'll call Mark, continued on. As we approached the right side of the building, it became very obvious that this place had been abandoned for a very long time. The front entrance was boarded up and there were vines and ivy growing all over the building. Our mutual friend said that the only way in was through a busted-in wall in the back. We went around back, and sure enough, there was a broken and narrow section of wall we could get in through. We stepped in, and it was completely dark. We couldn't see our hands in front of our faces, so we turned on the flashlights on our phones and looked around. There was trash and debris everywhere on the concrete floors. We were in what appeared to be the main room of the old store, and it was huge. An entire football field could probably fit in this room. We could even hear an echo when we talked. We started looking along the walls, which were covered in graffiti. The graffiti was littered with what must have been gang symbols as well as profanity, as you would expect. What was really unsettling, though, was that as we moved further along the back wall, the graffiti was getting more and more disturbing. One of them read, "Kill yourself tonight." Then the graffiti was getting satanic. There were tons of inverted crosses, pentagrams, 666s, and violent scenes depicted. While this stuff was creepy enough, it wasn't the worst of what we saw. Towards the end of the building, there were some steps leading to smaller rooms. As we shone our lights on the steps, we saw a large dry pool of what was probably blood all over the steps. This deterred us from exploring the smaller rooms beyond, so we headed to the left side of the room. As we were walking, our lights caught something hanging from the ceiling. We got closer and saw what it was. It was a noose, still hanging from one of the rafters. It became very obvious that the people that come to this place use it for very evil purposes. After that, we decided we'd spent enough time in there and headed for the hole in the wall we entered through. We got outside and saw that there was another smaller building/warehouse behind the main one. Despite the freaky things we saw inside, we were still curious and decided to check this one out too. One thing that was very odd was that there was a small room in the front of the warehouse that had no doors, only one window. Inside was a large inverted cross hanging from the decrepit ceiling. We came to the left side of the warehouse where the large garage-style entrance was. This building was similar to the first one. It was one large empty room with tons of trash everywhere. There was more disturbing graffiti. However, there were these holes at the base of the walls that were really odd-looking. We shined our lights down them but couldn't see the bottom. What were these for? We had seen enough at this point and headed back outside. It was then that my friend Mark got a call from Jim. As he was talking to Jim, his face suddenly changed to a downright horrified expression. I said, "What's wrong? What?" What he said next sent a chill down my spine. "Someone else is here," he said. Before we could even turn to run, a white truck peeled around the corner at an alarming speed, heading right towards us. We started booking it towards my car, and as we got around the other back corner of the building, we saw another black truck parked alongside. But we kept running as fast as we could, and thankfully the three of us made it back to my car. We got in and peeled out of there. I don't know what those guys in the trucks were there for or why they chased after us, but based on what we saw in those buildings, it wasn't anything good. Thankfully, we never found out, and we never returned to that place. I used to work nights as a security guard in a medium-sized corporate office building in New Jersey. And for the most part, the nights were boring, quiet, and uneventful, which is why what happened one night has stuck with me so vividly for years. It started around midnight, after the last employees had left the building and the lobby was empty except for me. Just me and the glow of the security monitors. My job was simple. Check cameras, make a couple of patrol rounds, log any incidents, and mostly just sit and watch for anything unusual. That night, I was going through my usual routine, scanning the screens for the elevators, the hallways, and the underground parking garage, when I noticed a figure moving between the cars on the lower garage feed, which immediately caught my attention because the lot should have been completely empty at this hour. Only people with 24-hour access could get in, and I knew no one had it at that moment. At first, I thought it might have been one of the late shift IT guys or maybe a cleaning crew member, but it didn't make sense since cleaning crews had left hours before, and the guy wasn't carrying any equipment or wearing a uniform. He was wearing a long, dark coat that looked a little oversized, and he wasn't heading to any particular car or toward the exit. He just moved slowly, weaving around the rows like he was inspecting the area or making sure no one was around. And something about the way he moved gave me the chills. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was off. I called my supervisor and explained what I was seeing, and he told me to stay at my post and keep an eye on the cameras, which I did, but my gut told me I needed to check it in person. So I grabbed my flashlight and headed down to the garage. The elevator ride was long, slow, and every floor that passed seemed to echo in the shaft, making me more on edge than I cared to admit. When the doors opened on the garage level, I scanned a lot with my flashlight, and it was empty, completely quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes every little creak of the building sound huge. I called out, "Hello, security here," but the echo returned empty, and I didn't hear any reply. I walked slowly down the rows of cars, shining light into every dark corner, every space between vehicles, but there was nothing there. Not a single shadow, not a single person. My pulse was racing, and I started to doubt myself, thinking maybe the camera was malfunctioning, or maybe it had picked up a shadow that wasn't really there. So I went back upstairs to the lobby, trying to shake it off. But as soon as I sat back down and looked at the garage feed again, there he was, standing in the exact same spot, as if he hadn't moved since I had been there. And now my stomach dropped, because I knew I had just been there, and there was no way he could have gotten back into the same spot unnoticed unless he had been watching me, or worse, waiting for me. I radioed my supervisor again, telling him I was going to keep watching the cameras, and he told me not to approach him unless absolutely necessary, which was easier said than done because I couldn't stop staring at him and my mind was already running through every possible scenario. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him wander slowly toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. He moved carefully, pausing, looking over his shoulder like he was checking for someone, and then disappeared from the camera just before reaching the door, which made my stomach knot. I checked every other feed, hallways, elevator lobbies, even the rooftop access, and there was nothing, no trace of him at all, which only made me feel worse because it was impossible for him to vanish that fast, and it gave me the sinking feeling that he had access to the building somehow, or he was hiding in a way that I couldn't see. I stayed at my desk, heart pounding, until the elevator dinged and opened in the lobby. Nobody was inside, but on the polished floor, I noticed wet footprints leading from the elevator out into the main lobby. Bare feet, which was wrong on so many levels because it was freezing outside, and he would have had to taken his shoes off just to wander barefoot. I froze in my tracks, realizing that if he was inside the building now, he could be anywhere, and every unlocked office or storage room was a potential hiding spot. I called the local off-site patrol for backup and debated locking myself in the lobby, but something in me told me I needed to do a patrol and confirm the situation, which in retrospect was probably a mistake. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and started walking the hallway slowly, flashlight in hand, scanning every office door, checking for movement. Every creak of the building made me jump. Halfway down the hall, I saw one of the office doors slightly ajar, which shouldn't have been possible because it was always locked at night.
I pushed it open with my flashlight peering inside, but the room was empty except for a computer monitor and a chair pushed in under the desk. Nothing else. I stepped out into the hall again and froze, because I heard the sound of footsteps on the tile behind me. Not mine. Heavy, wet, and uneven, moving fast toward me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I swung my flashlight around the hall, catching a glimpse of the dark coat at the end of the hallway. He wasn't running, but he was walking fast with a purpose, and it hit me that he had been following me the entire time, hiding just out of view whenever I checked the cameras. I bolted, sprinting down the hall toward the stairwell, barely noticing the handrail slamming against my arm as I rushed past. The footsteps followed close enough that I could hear them clearly now, echoing in the hall, and I realized I had no idea how he'd gotten inside, no idea what he wanted, and the panic was almost suffocating. I dove into the stairwell, sliding down a few steps, and slammed the door behind me as the footsteps thundered on the floor above. Then they stopped abruptly, and I sat there shaking for several minutes, trying to catch my breath and convincing myself I had imagined it. But the sound of my own breathing and the echo of those steps made me feel insane. When the patrol finally arrived, I was pale, sweaty, and trembling. We walked the building together, floor by floor, room by room, and the garage was completely empty. No sign of the intruder, no footprints, nothing. And when we checked the cameras, the footage from the time he appeared had been overwritten or corrupted, leaving a gap in the recording that made my skin crawl even more. I quit that job within a month, partly because of the fear, and partly because I couldn't handle walking the hallways alone anymore, especially when the garage was empty and the wind outside made the building creak, because every shadow and every noise reminded me of him walking behind me, just out of sight, waiting. Even years later, I get anxious in parking garages or office buildings at night, and I still check over my shoulder more than I should, thinking I might see that long coat rounding a corner, hearing those wet footsteps behind me again. And I know that what I experienced wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a faceless ghost or a phantom. It was a real person, a stalker. And the thought that he had been inside that building, following me, hiding just out of view, and that I might never know how he got in or what he wanted, is something that still haunts me every time I think about that night.